Welcome everybody to the Left, Right, and Center show. We're sorry for popping off late here, but we're in the middle of firing our producer because he needs to be fired. I don't think we were paying him enough,
Can
honestly.
I guess you can technically fire somebody even if you're not paying them, right?
Right? Yeah,
Yeah, you can.
it's the principle
Yeah.
of the thing, right?
Okay.
He's bad and he needs to feel bad. That's what I come away from this with. So, how's everybody doing? We all good? How's your guys' work week, huh?
Fantastic.
It's been stressful. It's been a busy one. Was off for a couple snow days over the last couple weeks and trying to get caught up this week. So
Did you guys get a lot of snow?
for us, yeah, it was. I think the heaviest snow we've had in like 10 years or 15 years or something like
Oh wow.
Wow.
But I mean, it was only like 6 inches or 8 inches, or I think we had 8 in
Wait,
my
what?
house.
You don't get that much snow there?
No, not really. Not lately too. Like not over the last 10 or 15 years. I know when I was a kid, I remember getting a lot more. But
I seem to remember that too. Do you guys remember getting a lot of snow when we were kids? Like, I just remember my winters were just like snowy, and then as I started growing up and realizing what was going on, it was like, it's like, where's all the snow?
global warming.
Yeah, that's what you
It's
say.
Almost as if the world got hotter.
That's kind of what I'm getting at, but at the same time, it's only like a 1 or 2 degree difference at this point. Like, is that really going to stop snow?
Yeah.
It's just
Put your freezer at 34 degrees and see if you still get
Oh,
ice
stop it.
or if you get water.
So churlish. So churlish.
No, I mean, I remember getting doing Halloween in the snow at some point when I was a kid, and I've not seen snow on Halloween around here. I can't even remember the last time.
We once
So-
had that bad October snowstorm in Connecticut where like the whole state you canceled Halloween. It happened when I was in high school because it was like none of the leaves had fallen off the trees yet, and then all the snow came down and just toppled like all the power lines. It was bad.
Yeah, I was in the Navy for that. I got this. I think I was in Hawaii. It was it was nice. I got to
There
hear
you go.
about the trials and tribulations.
I remember we some friends and I they were using our high school as a shelter, so we snuck in and then explored the entire underground of the high school, which used to be a nuclear bomb shelter in the Cold War. We just snuck in overnight.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. We made good use of the October snowstorm.
Seriously, that's probably the best use. All right, let's get on with this. Do you guys? So I just wanted to talk about. So let's do a little bit of news, and then we'll get into the topic of the day. By the way, for our viewers, topic of the day is going to be immigration. We're excited to present to you the latest and greatest of what's going on in the border, whether those borders be airports or otherwise. And then later on, we're actually going to try a new segment. We're going to do something a little bit different today. So stay tuned for that, and we're excited to show you that. So, but for now, let me pop right into this. So. I've mentioned Gina Carano a couple times now. She was the star that got fired from The Mandalorian over her tweets. We talked about those pretty much at length last week. I just wanted to say I'm not going to talk about her too much. We can move on to whoever's next, but she is an absolute gem of a human being. She went on the Ben Shapiro Sunday special, and he interviewed her, and she is just a gem. She is the sweetest, like kindest, and most understanding person, despite the fact that she was literally like persecuted and fired. She's like defending everybody who was persecuting her. She's defending Pedro Pascal against all of the people who are trying to contrast his tweets with her tweets to make an example. Like, she is a sweet human being, and cancel culture is cancer. Like, I just like this. It's getting insane. Like, she is a beautiful human being. So I recommend everybody I recommend, here's what I'll say, right? Because there's not much for you guys to say on that, I guess. But I recommend people go watch the Ben Shapiro special. Even if you don't like Ben Shapiro, go watch the special with her. It's a tragedy that she got fired.
I'm never going to watch Ben Shapiro. I'm sorry.
I think that's a problem. Even
No,
if you don't
I
agree
really
with his
try.
point of view, like there's nothing wrong with seeing the other side.
I read. I make sure I get my daily dose of like the Wall Street Journal. I have a subscription there, and every night before I go to bed, I check Wall Street Journal, which is conservative. I check New York Times, which is slightly more left, and I check Washington Post, which is just the meth addict of professional journalism, but it is professional journalism, and that's how I get the sides. But Ben Shapiro is as much of an entertainer as he is a attempted news broadcaster. It's like watching Trevor Noah. You're not going to get anything new. It's just fun to listen to if you agree with the stuff. So
I only slightly agree with that. I halfway agree with that. But
Yeah, I don't think Ben
I'm not
Shapiro is
telling
funny at all.
I'm not telling people to go watch the Ben Shapiro show. I'm telling you to go watch the special with Gina Carano.
no,
right?
I'm not. She sounds like a great person. She really does. But I can't bring myself to watch
Chris,
it.
you would love her.
I
absolutely
saw-
love this person.
I watched the special. I watched that interview, and I thought she was a good person. You know, like I remember thinking like, yeah, she'd be fun to hang out with and just have as a friend.
Yeah.
Like she just seems super real. But she is not good at all at getting her point out and across. Like even in that interview when
I think
she's
she was
talking.
nervous, man.
Oh yeah, she is.
nervous?
Yeah, she even admits that she's terrible about that stuff and
Yeah.
super shy and very nervous and all that. But even nerves aside, like it just I don't know. It's funny that I thought she did really well as an actress, which I guess you don't really have to get your own personal feelings out. You just are memorizing a script and being a
Right.
character.
Well,
so
I
it's
mean, you also
different,
get
but-
multiple takes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I generally don't watch Ben Shapiro. I used to watch him periodically, but we've talked about this. I feel like he's fallen off a cliff from being at least logical on the right to kind of just being a little more far extreme. But every now and then, if I see a guest that I want to hear from, and I don't mind, I kind of want to hear both sides when I look at stuff. I find him to be, tolerable occasionally.
Yeah, fair enough. Tim, do you have anything? You got something to share?
Yeah, I have one that actually one of our viewers sent me. See if I can get this to load up. There we go. Switch over. Did you guys see the Coca-Cola training seminar that says to try to be less white?
Yes. Did you see that, Chris?
I did not. No, I have not.
So in their training seminar, so they've come out and said this isn't their what was their wording? I want to make sure I say it exactly right. Anyway, they came out and said it's not part of their core curriculum, but it is part of their online, like LinkedIn training curriculum that their employees get. But it literally says, I don't know if you can see it on the stream, but like right there, it says try to be less white. And in this article, it talks about some of the other pieces that went with that. Like, tips to being less white include be less arrogant, be less certain, be less defensive, be more humble, listen, believe, break with apathy, and break with white solidarity. It's pretty extreme.
I have a good can of cola I'm going to go get right after this podcast.
You have a what?
He said I have a nice can of Coke. I'm going to go get.
Look, oh man. I mean, it's like clearly one of those things that was not meant to be out into the public. It was like a PR gig.
Right. You understand how that sounds, right? Like I get the
Yeah, of
I get the
course.
sense that you understand what that sounds like to the normal person.
Of course, this sounds really bad, but like, I mean, obviously, they're not. This was a training seminar. It was meant to be like an internal thing. Like whoever leaked that probably is getting fired, like or not getting employed.
Well, I
for
would
it.
hope not. I
Well,
don't think
No, I think it is. It's the training is publicly available on LinkedIn. It's
Oh,
part
yeah?
of their public training. Yeah. It's
Sure.
not like it got leaked or anything.
I see.
That's what
Yeah,
I mean
I
by
mean-
it's not part of their core curriculum. It's some training they put out for the public. But it is something that their employees have
Yeah,
to watch, based
It's
on
not a
what
good
the
look.
article says.
I'm not. Look. I know exactly what they're trying to say.
I even know what they're trying to say. I'm letting you flap in the wind because
I don't like it. I mean, you shouldn't write something like that. It should just be like, hey, let's like have racial sensitivity training. That's a different story. Or like diversity and equity training. That's a different story. But like, just simply saying be less white, kind of, you missed the mark.
clearly.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if a company? So this is a tweet that I saw, by the way. So I'm just repeating that. But it said, could you imagine if a company came out with training that said, be less Hispanic, be less black, be less indigenous, be less anything other than white? Like how canceled immediately, like they would
It wouldn't
be.
be good. It wouldn't be good, and that's why, like, I think it's racial sensitivity training is a different story, but just writing be less white. I mean, I'm sure we're clipping one line out of a broader segment, but I'm not even going to give it the benefit of that doubt. You probably shouldn't be saying that in a training.
Well,
it misses the mark totally.
In the training, so one of the pages in the training says to be less white is to be less oppressive, be less arrogant, be less certain. Like they're defining these characteristics with race, right? Like how is that not blatant racism?
Right.
Well,
Which is my
so I'm going to give you one, like, it's prejudice, which is different than racism. This is not anything that matters to people in like the normal, like, colloquial conversation of the world, but in the world of, like, academia, you would differentiate, like, I guess this is just like a tidbit of information. Racism requires a power dynamic, right? So to be racist, historically speaking, means like you have authority.
According to which definition, Chris? Hold on, let me stop you right there.
Oh my gosh, I don't know, man. Go find the Webster dictionary. This is just how you like. There's not a written dictionary on this. It's just how you talk about it in academia. It's like racism is understood to have a power dynamic where prejudice is hate towards anybody on something that's unchangeable. But racism requires you to have a power dynamic over another. South Africa apartheid. It is racist because white people in apartheid held massive political control over the people they deemed colored or black.
So
Okay, so
historically and definitively in text in like the dictionaries and things, that's not what the definition of racism is. Racism is purely the belief. It's just the belief that one race is superior to the other.
Sure. And that's what I'm just saying is, like, in academic circles, you would discuss racism in a different lens than prejudice. This would be considered prejudice. But if you want to call it racist, that's fair game still. I'm just trying to give the fun little tidbit from the progressives over here.
I actually agree with you that based on the definition I just said, this isn't really racist. I think you're actually right, because part of the definition I just said. So I'm going to take back what I said, right?
Attributes to whiteness.
I know it does, because racism, like I said a second ago, the definition of racism is really, to my belief and what I've read in dictionaries, is that you believe one race to be superior than another, and that's not what this is conveying, right? It's not saying that the other races are more superior to white.
It's saying white people have these negative characteristics inherent in whiteness.
So I actually agree with Chris that this is more of a prejudice issue than it's a racial prejudice. It's not racism, if I want to go with the definition that I believe of with racism. So I agree with you, Chris. I agree. It's a fine line. You got me, Chris. You got me on that one. But I mean, they literally say to be less white is to be less oppressive, less arrogant, less ignorant. I mean,
yeah, that's racist. Like, fuck, man, that's racist.
It's crazy. I can't. How does that get past anybody to actually get to get published out and put out? That's crazy. Anyway, enough on that one. I just thought it was a crazy thing.
If I can just add one thing, I guess I'm disheartened by these types of press releases, PRs, not because I disagree with them. Like, I pretty much am like, yeah, there's a conversation to be had on racial sensitivity training, but it just takes oxygen away from, like, the real art debates, the real problems of, like, yeah, there are racial inequities, there is racial injustice, there is racism towards people of color, and it just sucks because, like, the reality is, like, these bylines, you know, they get the attention of a lot of people, and it makes sense why they get the attention of a lot of people. But it does take oxygen away from the real conversations that like we probably should be having. Instead, it's like, oh God, look what the social justice warriors are doing this week versus like. And so I guess maybe the social justice warriors should tune this down a bit and put the energy towards like the true like problem, which is really solving inequities and whatnot.
I kind of disagree on multiple levels. I think one, this brings up the race conversation again. So we're talking about racial inequalities because of this. So it's adding oxygen in our case. Now we're not talking about
really
it the way you
social
want.
Justice warriors, though, not really racism.
Yeah, maybe. I'm just talking about the topic in general. I'm not.
It's just
right. But have we mentioned black people at all? You know what I'm saying? Like we haven't even really mentioned black people. We haven't mentioned statistics about how black people are oppressed or aren't oppressed. Like we haven't engaged in the conversation at all. So it's kind of funny. I actually agree with Chris. Like this stuff needs to, I would say, go away entirely because it's absolutely wrong, right? And I would meet that on the merits. But you're right. It takes away from real issues, right? Stuff we could really be talking about.
Yeah. No, I'm in agreement that this particular training should, and apparently it has been taken down, but yeah. Anyway, that one went on for a while. Sorry. I thought it was interesting.
Right. Do you have anything, Chris?
Yeah, it'll tie into tonight's issue, but Biden's development of the reopening the children's camp for undocumented immigrants, for unaccompanied minors, and I've heard a few different valuable points on it, but in a gist, like, I mean, the camp was reopened, so it's obviously intended to house minors, which sucks because, I mean, you know, a lot of people, myself included, when voting for Biden, is like, hey, we wanted this ended immediately. This was like a top issue for us, is like, why are children being held at the border? I guess the devil's advocate, if I can do that to myself, because I'm not happy with this, is that there's such a problem with record keeping right now, where a lot of the kids that come over, we don't know where their parents are. We don't know if, like, do you have the jurisdiction to just throw a kid in foster care? Do we find their parents? And so what do you do in the meantime, right? Are you even allowed to put them into a foster care? And even in that dynamic, you got so many kids in group homes. Is that even an option to situate a foster home for an unaccompanied minor? So at the end of the day, you know, I'm glad that it looks like they're not going to be in cages. They're just going to be in jail cells, if that makes any sense. But I'm not here for it. I'm not happy about it. I think but I also realize, I guess, the president, there's no easy decisions on this one. So it's easy on the outside to beat him up for it, but I am not holding my breath. I'm being quite open and upfront. Like, yeah, I genuinely 100% disagree with Biden on this. We should be really aggressively finding a way to take care of these children that are at the border. You got kids.
Well, what's your solution? If you like, I'm very curious. Yeah.
We need to hold this off till we get to the main topic.
That's true. I suppose we could. We'll sustain that for later. So
that's fair. But that's my new story. That's my new story for the main topic.
Okay. All right. Let me get to this then, and then we'll see if Tim has something, and then maybe we can spin right into the main segment there. But slight switch in gears, going back to January 6th. I'm curious as to whether both of you saw this, or either one or the other saw this. So you remember Brian Sicknick, the Capitol police officer who died?
Yeah.
Okay. So did you guys hear that that there's conflicts in the reporting about his death? Yes. No.
I have not.
It's a no. Okay. All right. So there are reports that.
Did it come from Hunter's laptop?
So
Hunter's laptop.
Yeah, from Hunter's laptop. Yeah. So apparently the reporting on this is all sorts of messed up. And this article that I have up right here, I'll give you the title for those who are listening and not watching. Capitol Police Officer's death remains mired in conflicting reports and official silence. And this is a pretty good article. It's on Yahoo News. It's decently long. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but the main bullet points are he was reported to be dead before he was dead, number one, which was weird. He died the following morning afterwards, and the official death was ruled from a stroke. Thank you. God, the word's right there. Yeah. So he actually died from a stroke, as opposed to the blunt force trauma to the head, right? So there's three main points. One, he was initially reported to have died from blunt force trauma to the head. That wasn't true. He died from a stroke. Number two, the blunt force trauma, aka the throwing of a fire extinguisher at his head, hasn't been confirmed, right? We've been trying to confirm it since the riots, and it hasn't been confirmed yet. And then, number three, he sent a text to his friend after he got off work that day saying he was fine. He just got pepper sprayed. So these three things have come to light since the initial uproar over his death, and it's calling into question whether he was actually killed by the protests or if the protests were even related to his death. Now let me just say, I'm not saying yet. I'm not going to conclusively say yet whether he was or was not. His death was linked to the January 6th riot. I'm not prepared to make that statement. But if it turns out that he didn't, in fact, die from injuries sustained while on duty, and it was a stroke, right, and it's pretty much random, then people who are assessing that January 6th riot need to adjust their view of it, right? Because before there was a death, and then there was an eye gouging, and then there was, general battery. Now there's just eye gouging and general battery, right? And so whatever moral weight you were putting on the riots for the death of Brian Sicknick, you need to remember to go ahead and adjust your worldview if it turns out that he didn't in fact die from those injuries.
Why is it so hard for people on the right to just be like, yeah, Trump supporters did something really messed up?
Literally nobody has a hard time doing that. I'll do that. I will do that from now until
but you're not the vast majority.
No, I am.
You're not the vast majority of Republicans that I know.
Okay, so the Ben Shapiro that you hate is as the far right guy. He says it all day long, right? It was an evil, disgusting thing that they did.
Yeah, he's also not the vast majority.
Here's the reality: if he was experiencing incredible stress and he was hit by something, that can induce.
Okay, but that's speculation.
No,
and I'm not even saying you're wrong.
But also, let's just take that entirely out. You have two police officers who literally committed suicide that within the next couple of days as a product of this riot, basically directly linked to the what they've seen, the PTSD, the horror of this. It's like can you imagine being chased by people in the Capitol? That's what happened to one of the police officers who killed himself, and they're trying to fight to get him buried at a respectable cemetery. They're trying to fight to bring him up as an actual casualty of this, whether or not that counts or constitutes it. It's no matter what, this was wrong.
So, I feel for the people's families and the people that, even the people themselves that committed suicide and everything. I get that it was a tragic situation, but I personally just in my being don't put the same weight on someone that took their own life because of, PTSD, as you said, or tragic, versus somebody that literally had their life taken from them, from an assault, right? It's not the same to me.
There's something in the psychology world. It's called the coupling factor, and the coupling factor is that suicide will only occur when perfect circumstances occur to create a dynamic of suicide. So, for example, an easy way of coupling is, let's say, Nathan, say you're a manly man, you never cry. But for some reason, when you read Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham to your brothers, it just gets you, man. You just tear up. You won't cry when you read Dr. Seuss's Green Eggs and Ham when you're by yourself, and you don't cry with your brothers, and you cry no other factor. But for some reason, when you read Dr. Seuss with your bros, you cry. No reason for it, but it's called coupling. And this is a real thing. It's usually when two or three variables line up perfectly in sync, it creates a specific outcome to those three variables. And so for these police officers, who actually plenty of other things may have been going perfectly well in their life, this absolutely could have triggered a suicide. It is not impossible. It could have been Capitol riot.
I'm not arguing that that's not the case.
So I'm just saying, like, the Capitol riot, regardless, to me, it constituted in the deaths of several officers, regardless of whether or not Brian Sicknick, if we're gonna debate that he had a stroke and that's what caused it, or if generally speaking he got hit in the head, blunt force trauma constituted the stroke. To me, that the riots caused deaths that wouldn't have existed otherwise.
Yep, that's probably true, right? But I don't, right? But like again. Right, and as we talk across the aisle, we start doing this whataboutism. I mean, there were 17 people killed by rioters over the summer, and I don't think that you were this concerned about it, right? I don't think you even really paid attention to it that much, right?
Well, we didn't. No one brought it up either. I mean, we didn't talk about the deaths of that.
Yeah, but that's not the point, right? If you cared, you would have looked into it. I cared enough, and the people that I listen to care enough to bring that information up to light. Like, that's something that I care about is deaths, right?
Not that this is like a different degree, but it is. I mean, riots at the Capitol hold a different level of national regard and press and attention than riots in Portland, even though those are severe.
I condemn both of these, right?
Yeah, me too.
Okay, but okay, then there we are.
I'm not here for Portland riots. The national
of them were evil acts that were perpetrated against oftentimes their fellow men, and they are condemned.
All against it. There's absolutely no reason why Portland should even be rioting still. There's no reason that people have been murdered in riots that defeats the whole purpose of a protest. Whether it's property damage is a different thing. Maybe that's where we delineate. I personally am a bit quite more forgiving when it comes to burning down a target, but when it comes to taking life, that's pretty much or injuring people, that's a line that can't be crossed, and when it's crossed, it invalidates that exercise of
right. And just one more thing. I mean, if between burning down a target and storming the U.S. Capitol, I actually choose storming the U.S. Capitol because the people at the Capitol riots were completely wrong and stupid and didn't do any of their homework, and that makes them evil for doing what they did. But they were at least taking it out on the people that they were against, right? So they had an issue with the U.S. government, so they took it out on the U.S. government. The rioters had an issue with policemen, so they took it out on Target, family-owned businesses, apartment buildings, car dealerships, whatever. So I don't think there's more parity there.
I still believe that the majority of the damage and things that, I don't want to say majority, a good chunk of the damage and things that were done from the other riots weren't actually from people that were truly there protesting for the point. I think it was more from just being there and seeing the opportunity and just wanted to be destructive.
I think when you have like these it's a good point to delineate, like Capitol riot. I mean, everybody was there for a very particular movement. It happened relatively organically, inorganically. It was definitely, the fuel was lit, but the fuel was very specific.
What was that particular movement, though? I think the problem here. So, Chris, I agree. I agree, and we probably have to move on.
This is coming right from Mitch McConnell. This is not coming from just the people over on this side of the aisle. Mitch McConnell was like, Trump incited this.
Okay, but I'm not really arguing that, even though that's I would say incorrect. What I'm saying is what do you think all of those people were there for, right? And I'm even talking about people that strolled into the Capitol after the police were gone.
Sure. I think what I'm just trying to say is that like the opportunity for bad actors to get involved when it's just like running around the city, lighting stuff on fire is quite different than, a that led to something violent. I mean, you have, I do believe that the opportunity for it's a really shitty whataboutism. It's really shitty apples to oranges because it's hard to compare the two, right? Like it's an unfair comparison, but I'm just speaking purely logistically. It's definitely a little bit easier to like, if I'm an anarchist to hijack a Black Lives Matter protest in downtown Portland than it is to hijack the Capitol. When everyone riding the Capitol was mostly rocking,
But like Chaz and Chop was the point. All right, we're getting off topic. We're doing so much whataboutism. It's crazy. It's amazing.
Whataboutism.
I know. All right, Tim. One more thing, and then let's hit the main segment there.
Yeah, I've always got so many, and I gotta pick.
I know.
I had a Ben Shapiro one. I had one that
Well, that's clearly the
that
one
was
you need to make.
targeted to one of our viewers that I thought I'll just have to send it to him after. So anyway, after two serious ones, I decided to go with a more lighthearted one. And so for those just listening, this one, the original says, "Sucks to be an electric car owner in Texas right now." And the response is, "I'm just going to wait for people to learn that gas pumps require electricity to pump gas."
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I did with this one? I looked at it and Reddit is so leftist. I just like scroll through. I see a leftist thing. I like work it through in my head, like, oh, that's wrong. And then I scroll past it and work it through in my head and that's wrong. But then I got to that one because I remember seeing that one and I was like, yeah, that's actually right. It's like, yeah, good point.
It's just sometimes you see these, like you see these statements like that all the time. The sucks to be an electric car owner now, or like and 99% of the time there's no good thought behind it, and it just doesn't, doesn't make any sense. And this is just a perfect response. Like, really?
Yeah, that's really funny.
But this is just a lighthearted. Let's chuckle about it real quick before we move on to some more serious.
That's pretty good.
Serious stuff.
Good. Oh yeah, because it's gonna get serious here. So, all right, let's preface this a little bit, as much prefacing as we can do. So, we wanted to talk immigration today. Recently, it's been in the news again, as Chris brought up his story. President Biden recently reopened one of the quote unquote overflow. What is it? Overflow facilities or something? Some benign name like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Right, not concentration camps, as you'll notice. They're called overflow facilities.
But they're still concentration camps. In my eyes. They're still concentration camps.
Yeah. So we thought we'd talk about it today. So let's see. How should we do this? Chris, why don't you let's do it this way. Why don't you indict the system? Let's start with the overflow camps, and then you can maybe lay out some arguments of stuff that you really disagree with.
Sure. I mean, well, let's just kick it off with the overflow for camps. I mean, first and foremost, I guess for me, there's almost no. So I get the obstacles that an administration has in front of them, right? Because you can't just like open the border. Although many people on the left would want that. I
don't know how many though. That is pretty radical.
It's a more radical position. It's not one that I'm necessarily for. I'm definitely not for open borders, but I am for a very, 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 very different approach to how we handle our unaccompanied minors. Because right now, what's ends up happening is that you, particularly the big issue under the Trump administration was the family separation of unaccompanied minors, right? So, and I get it. Maybe you don't want adults and kids in the same facility. Definitely opens up some really, evil things that could occur there. But right now, you end up with really problematic developmental problems when we're talking about like raising kids in these camps for years, right? Like there's cases of and not necessarily anomalies of children that have spent 2-3+ years in a detention center, and that's can you imagine spending high school in a detention center, right? That's basically what's occurring.
That's crazy.
And when
those are anomalies, right?
It's an anomaly, but like if I recall looking at the statistics, it's still like a half-year average waiting time in these facilities. A lot of them are for profit, so there's it's not that there's an incentive to keep the kids there, but there's definitely not an incentive to like scurry them out and get them to the next step, because it's a per day billing. You end up with really problematic issues, right? Like how do you? So let's say you're running a kid.
Wait, hold on. Let me just address that. I don't think the facility centers control that, right? It's a backlog on the U.S. The immigration judges.
Sure. Still for profit, which I think is messed up.
Okay, but the reason for that, maybe we can get into this, right? The reason why those facilities are for profit, and the reason why children cannot be detained with their parents in federal prisons, is the Flores settlement. Okay, so this was a 1997 settlement. That it's kind of complicated. You can look it up. But basically, one of the outcomes of this Flores settlement, which is a ruling, who's Flores versus Reno Court, you cannot detain minors in federal facilities. right? So basically, if you are holding the parents for illegally crossing, or while they're waiting for their asylum, whatever it is, you can't have the kids in there with them. So and then that means that you can't. It's not just that you're separating the kids; it means you can't have them in a federal facility, which means you have to have a private or a for-profit, because nobody's going to run a charity on this. Maybe somebody should, but nobody's. Like the only way to do this is for-profit, right? So that's why it's for-profit. It's not greedy capitalists taking in the brown kids from the southern border to make it bags of cash. It's settlement, right? And that Flores settlement was the result of a suit from the ACLU, right? So this was activists that got this done, and I'm not saying that because it was done by activists in the past that it's right. I'm saying, like, I'm giving you some reference here. Like, this was done by leftist activists in the past. This was seen as a moral good, getting kids out of federal detention facilities.
Yeah, but I'm going to guess that the intention wasn't to just throw them into private detention facilities, right?
I'm going to guess that the purpose was to leverage that into making the government just let them go into the interior, which they started doing.
Or back. I mean, I think we should take a step back a little and talk about the situations that result in kids getting put into these facilities, right?
Sure.
And I don't know all of them, so I need to be brought up to speed a little bit. But I'm picturing, like, let's say mom and dad and their child try and cross the border illegally. They get caught. The U.S. government has decided that rather than to just bring them back across the border and let them go, they want to prosecute them, and so they put them in a detention facility. And as maybe they want to prosecute the parents and not the child, but then what do you do with the child? Right? You can't just release him back into Mexico with no parents, right? Is that the right thing to do? That's just, hey, you're on your side of the border. See ya, right? That's not the right thing to do. Do you lock them up with their parents? Do you punish them as an adult? Basically, is that the right thing to do? And do you separate them from their parents? So
let's talk the causes. So
the cause is we are prosecuting, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't. I'm just saying the cause is we are prosecuting the people that cross, right? And so there's two causes. One is that we're prosecuting them. Two is the same thing happens, as I understand it, and to tell me that there's more situations that result in this. The two I know of are illegal come across, they're getting prosecuted, and then the other one is they come across for due to persecution, right?
Asylum.
And
they're looking for asylum.
Yeah, for asylum. Thank you. I couldn't think of the word. So they're coming across for asylum, and they're held in detention until the asylum can be verified, and that takes time. And so again, they're held, and because of that act and other things, they don't want the parents and the kids to be held together, and then they also get put into those centers. But those are the two reasons that I know of.
The third. So the third is I think this might actually. It's unclear to me, but this may be the bulk of them, and it's unaccompanied minors. So they either come across alone or they come across in a group, like a caravan, but they don't have their parents with them.
Okay.
So when we look at some of the problems, though, so just like Googling around a bit, this is coming from the Marshall Project, and just the data is also available. It's pulled from ICE, so at least what's public. So the federal government does have a 72-hour holding rule with unaccompanied minors. You can't be locked up in a cage for more than 72 hours. 50% of the 300,000, is that the right number? Yep. Of 300,000. That is not incorrect. 40% of 300,000 children who came over here were held for more than 72 hours. And I get it. There's a good conversation. We say, well, what do we do when you have 300,000 kids coming over? But
kind of a kegger.
Why are kids being held in cages? There has to be a better answer. There has to be a better response to this, especially when you dive into the impacts of what trauma does to a kid. And I get it. Maybe they're escaping. Maybe we need to reform asylum, right? Maybe we need to have a better asylum review procedure. Maybe ICE needs more funding to do more.
That's what I was going to suggest, obviously.
Right? Maybe get more social workers involved. I see no reason why Border Patrol agents are responsible for dynamics of children housing. We should, and maybe there already are social workers. Maybe there already are.
I would bet a lot of money that there are, and
Right.
that's probably my
Right.
bias showing through. But I mean, those facilities aren't probably just like, again, it's probably not just literally like greedy old capitalists stalking around the outside of the facility. I'm pretty sure they probably have social workers that are that want to work with children and help them.
Yeah, it's just a rough mess. I mean, let's see, it does.
So-
No,
I mean,
I
I
mean,
think-
actually, for what it's worth, it does appear like the National Association of Social Workers have been condemning the way ICE has been handling immigrant children. So it doesn't. Whatever they got going on, the National Association of Social Workers is not happy with it. So I just feel I really it hits home, and it's one of those places where it's like when we look at other countries, like United Kingdom holds down 42 kids in a whole year. Canada, I mean, I get it. Borders are different. Australia, I'm sure, has way less children. You can't just like cross the border to get into Australia.
Right.
But there's got to be
As the British or the English Channel.
Yeah, I mean, people.
Well, that and
we have a unique dynamic with being on the border of essentially South America, which is an incredible poverty in many places, for better or worse.
Also though, for European countries, and Britain included until recently with Brexit, part of the European Union agreement was that if you were a citizen of any of those countries, you can go live in any of the other countries. Yeah. So where are you illegally immigrating into Britain from? Generally their borders are all allowable locations. So
so they were usually migrants, right? So they would make their way up to Europe from Africa or the Middle East, and then they would.
Right. I'm not saying they don't get any. I'm just saying
that would be my guess, is that's where, back when it was basically European open borders, that's probably the only migrants they were detaining, honestly.
And there's definitely opportunities, I would say, then to say, like, maybe one opportunity here is maybe we should be injecting some funds into different countries in South America as foreign policy to, like, we improve conditions so you don't need to flee in the first place, right? But like there's got to be a better way for us to handle this crises, especially with the children at the border. Like, that's just a different story, right? And I mean, maybe families are like, hey, they'll lock us up because we're adults, but like maybe the kids are getting a better life. And I get it. Like, it's not easy you're against impossible odds when you're talking about living in Colombia or Venezuela right now. Guatemala's having its.
Let me ask you this, Chris.
Yeah.
So there's a sort of a secondary effect to immigration to the United States, which is that the people who are ambitious enough to pick up their whole families and move here, I actually do respect that. But the families that are ambitious enough to do that, you're allowing them to leave their country and come here, as opposed to fixing their broken countries, right? And very oftentimes, this is an argument against taking their skilled labor, right? If you were to just say, one of the arguments against the immigration system is that we prioritize skilled labor, and that's our prerogative as a country, and I actually agree with it. But one of the arguments against it is that we're stealing all of the brightest and best from Central America, the people that are needed to actually tackle the problems that they have.
Yeah, I've never heard that argument before. I'm interested in, like, I don't know.
I think on its surface it's a logical argument, but if you dive down deep, the amount of people that we actually allowed to immigrate here and come in on work visas that would be the particular target of that argument is very small.
Move us forward. I mean, I don't think we're going to solve the children crisis at the border, but that kind of gets us right into the next point of immigration in general to this country is incredibly challenging. And so if you want to make it to the United States, if you want to make it over here, it's quite the waiting period. That's what I think almost creates this like secondary incentive to cross the border as an undocumented immigrant. And also, Nate, I mean, to your point, maybe there is a huge conversation to be had. It's like, hey, maybe we should be foreign policy injecting support into some of our South American countries. I mean, we definitely do that with Israel, right? So why not across the border? I was
thinking about that a lot today, actually, while I was researching up for this. It's like, we're putting a whole bunch of money in a whole bunch of different places. And I get it. There's actually, there's a race to influence Africa because the Congo is going to be the most populous country by 2100, and they're rapidly modernizing, and the person to influence them first is going to, probably maintain power over the world. Blah 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 blah. Right. So I understand why we're going after Africa in sort of a cynical fashion there, but I mean, there's just so much poverty right below us. Like, can you imagine if all of South America and Central America was a modernized, thriving first world, civilization?
Yeah,
can you imagine that?
Would be a superpower. Our continent would be a massive
right.
superpower.
We don't need anybody else at that point. Europe can go, do whatever they're doing. We have our.
We just kind of treat South America as like the there's kind of like the dumpster of our half of the world. I mean, it's pretty disturbing. I don't know if you've ever really looked into like what goes down economically in South America, but like Coca-Cola, for example. Speaking of Coca-Cola, it's funny to me when they do these really pro social justice PR stuff because companies have essentially lobbied and taken advantage of like the poor, corrupt governments in South America and have privatized most of the water supplies. And so, it is generally when I traveled into Peru, I was like in the rainforest, the Amazon. It was, and this is not an exaggeration, probably as easy, if not easier, to get Coca-Cola in the middle of the jungle than it was to get water, like clean bottled water. And then Coca-Cola owns both. They own the bottled water and the soda. So like, how crazy is that, right? So you basically, they're basically gambling and saying, hey, once water crises start really occurring, Coca-Cola owns Indasani. They own a ton of lakes in South America. They own the clean water supplies because it's not regulated like the United States. So South America has just been like the capitalistic mosh pit of like the wealthiest companies in the world.
Wait, hold on.
I'm sort of confused though. Like for me right now, where it's if I want to get bottled water, clean filtered bottled water, or a Coke, it's about equally as difficult as well. I'm not really sure what the point is there. I'm confused.
It's sometimes cheaper to get Coke than it is to get water.
It's cheaper here.
I think what I'm getting at too is like you don't have the option of using your own clean water in your house.
Right.
Gotcha.
So this is where my my free market brain is kicking into high gear here. So without Coca-Cola, you're saying there's no Coca-Cola or bottled water. Which bottled water
Coca-Cola? Well, what I'm saying is that without regulation, without governments, I mean, you basically have taken utilities and allowed utilities to become a giant profit motive.
Yeah. So the part I missed, I think, and misunderstood was he was saying that. So his point when he was like, "I'm in the jungle and it's easier to get Coke than water," that's what confused me. But where I'm at now, I think is what he's saying is, even for the populace, for them to get running water in their house that's potable, is more expensive than bottled water because all of the water supply, the clean water supplies, have been privatized, and it's very difficult because the governments have allowed that, and they're not considered utilities. Is that am I paraphrasing what you were saying correctly?
Because governments,
it's like living in Flint.
I mean, it's also the levels of corruption are just a different story. I remember this crazy story in Peru. Like this is getting away from Coca-Cola, but I'll never forget this when I was down there. I mean, so how like on the road, sometimes like halfway through construction, the roads are all really rigged because it's like they still have to fill it in. They got to smooth it out like halfway through construction. And so one of the districts in Lima, and most of Peru lives in Lima. I think the city is, it's basically the population center of the country. Excuse me. There's a whole district there that the governor got a grant to, boost the streets, improve the quality of the roads. And halfway through the construction, he just took the remaining funds, moved it to his bank account, and then flew to Argentina.
Oh my God.
So to this day, there's no roads in that district. It's all just rugged. Like it's like driving on like half done roads. And these are the problems that are going on with South America because, no one's really invested energy to develop like healthy, strong democracies. Instead, it's like these haphazard, like growth spurts that end up, without regulation, with the power of like established companies in countries like ours, just saying, hey, we can do whatever we want down there. Let's go make some money. And so you end up without zoning laws, regulations. You end up with like just these hodgepodges of streets that get
free market.
Well, free market without any regulation and without really a free market. A free market is like, the utopian free market, Nate, is like you're the bread, you're the bakery, and I don't know, I'm the bicycle maker, and you want a bike,
right.
so you give me 300 loaves of bread, right? That's the free market in the utopia. Like everyone equal exchange of goods and services, not like, hey, here's a brand new society, and then Jeff Bezos starts it off on day one with all the money he had from everybody else.
Look, and we can go back and forth all day on this, but if Coca-Cola in the end is providing the people with clean, non-microbe-full water, then at a cheaper price than they were receiving it before, then that is a good thing, right?
Well, that's not what he's saying is happening, right? What he's saying is they went in and took up all the water supply and are now selling it to them. Right?
Okay,
like
but are they selling it more expensively than it would have otherwise? And prove it to me.
They were doing this also by bribing governments. It didn't come
I don't know for sure, but
right. Okay,
level
so
of expense.
Then we can move on. Then, Chris, if what you're saying is accurate and they're bribing governments, like I'm not defending corruption at all, right? I'm obviously I'm just doing like my free market shtick. But like if they're bribing governments, if they are deliberately being monopolistic and they're not allowing competition or whatever sort of corrupt practices, obviously I'm against it, right? Obviously.
No, that's called free market practices, not corrupt practices.
It's not. Corruption is not free market.
Monopolistic is not corruption, it's free market. The free market allows for monopolies. The free market allows for you to gouge Texans' electric bills.
I'll send you guys a fun article that you can pick apart. This is a surface level one, but it gets into what I'm saying. But at the end of the day, the circle is back. It's South America's poor, and we have wealth, and we have gotten rid of incentives to kind of rebuild the countries down there. And for a lot of people, it's like, hey, let me just spend my life and move it to the United States in any way that I can, because that's going to be a better life for my kids. Versus, I don't know. I think there's a conversation to be had about like, what if we just invested in countries down there in the first place? And said, all right, cool. Why leave Mexico if Mexico is this wonderful, beautiful place without corruption, without fear of safety? Why leave Colombia if there's no guerrilla warfare, right?
Hey, look. Okay, so let's do this then. So I actually agree, and like I said, I've been thinking about this all day, and I've thought about this before. Like why don't we just invest in our backyard? And part of the massive problem with that I found out is that you actually can't really get the money to the people, right? So if you're saying we got to do infrastructure for Mexico, we got to do roads, we got to do office buildings for them, so we give them $200 million or $1 billion or $10 billion in foreign aid, that goes to the government, and the government in Mexico is controlled by the cartels. Right, yeah. So that money goes to the cartels, who then use that to build submarines and ship cocaine up into the United States.
Yeah.
So that is so. First of all, I don't really think that's the role of government. But hey, whatever. The government's whatever we want it to be at this point. But that argument aside, it's actually just very technically difficult. Like even for people like us who agree with it, to get that money actually to improve the lives of those people. Like we would literally have to invade them one by one and then establish democracies. And
are you kidding? Like imagine the boon for job work. If we as an American, if we were like, okay, we have 200 million and we want to give it to you to help you with your infrastructure, but we know you're corrupt as shit. So how about this? We are just going to send down laborers that we're paying for to do the work for you. That's jobs for Americans. Yeah. And infrastructure for the country, and we're making sure the money's going where we want it to.
Yeah, good luck getting the Republicans on board with that.
I know. Yeah.
Well, it is.
Why?
Kind of
Why? I thought you guys were the most I thought you were the most charitable people.
Yeah, we are.
The 1950s
and you want to give Americans jobs. Does it matter that the work is being done in America or not?
True. I guess we'll see.
I mean,
we'll
maybe I should be a politician. I don't know. But I mean, so the point I'm making is there's ways to do it, right? I mean, if we really wanted to, I think there's probably other reasons we're not doing that.
Physical
But I-
safety of people, probably.
I mean, probably, but ex-military need jobs too. Send down security, right? Like,
Maybe we just got to invade South America. Maybe this is the war that should
That's
happen.
what I've been getting at, Chris. Come on.
That's what Republicans really need to hear is like, let's invade
Yeah, we
South
need, like,
America.
okay. All right. Well, hey, listen. From me to you, we'll pull out of the Middle East if we can invade South America.
what was that?
Oh, it was a half-assed Trump attempt. So
It sounds like something Trump would say. It's like, hey, how would Trump?
I thought that it was like a Sicilian Trump or something. It was like the Godfather Trump.
No, it was
like,
a
what was
half-assed
that?
Trump thing. I did the first couple seconds of it and sounded horrible, so I just half-assed it.
Gotcha.
If we were Russia, we would have invaded Mexico by now.
Oh, for sure.
Mexico is Russia's Ukraine.
Yeah, the bread basket. Yeah.
So to get back on the topic of immigration,
So look, we agree
Chris, you go ahead.
that there is a massive driver of emigration from South and Central America up to the United States.
Yeah,
we
I
agree.
think we all agree. Yeah. So, the comment Chris made at one point was that it's extremely difficult to immigrate into the U.S., and I don't know that any of us are going to disagree with that.
No, nobody's going to disagree.
So I think where we could have a conversation on that point, though, is that a problem?
Yeah,
Right? Like, should it be easier to immigrate here, or should it be more difficult, or are we, in that sweet spot? Like, why is it an issue that it's difficult? I guess, Chris, if you can.
Sure. Nate and I have talked about this a bit, and I think we actually compromise on this for the most part. But to me, I feel like the happy medium here is that, first and foremost, to make your way into the United States is very, very challenging. So, if you the whole idea of chain immigration is very broken. That's not really a viable option into the country. Unless you have the fastest
Can you
immigration.
describe chain immigration?
You said chain?
Chain immigration, like chain link fence or a chain. It's like when you come in and then you get your parents in, and your parents bring their cousins in, and their cousins bring their grandmas in, and then before you know it, you have the entire country of Mexico moving right into Arizona. It just doesn't happen, and that's not exactly how chain migration.
That's because the limitations are a lot tighter than that. It's all married couple and children. That's it.
I mean, even then, I don't know if you guys. I'll get to the whole point, but it's actually a massive misconception that you can just marry your way into citizenship. I know a lot of people who were on DACA who are now getting married or have been married, and they still don't have a green card. They're still on DACA after they've been married. It is, once you're married, you still have to apply for citizenship, and it's a several year process. It's not guaranteed overnight. And so the issue is if you say you live in Venezuela or Mexico or China, United Kingdom, you want to make your way to the United States. You have to, first and foremost, you need to have proven employment as an option before you make your way over here, unless you have an Einstein visa. So
wait. Or I just got to put this out there. Or you can just marry a sailor in Guam. It's that easy, man.
well, then you green card it, and you can make But for most people, you have to have a job lined up. And so what ends up happening is that it's a 6-7 year process for most people. It's very, very limiting, very challenging to get into the country. Even if you have a student visa, to then transfer from student to work visa is very, very difficult to do. And so really what ends up happening is you have a lot of people coming over here as an undocumented immigrant because it's quicker, it's easier. And so to me, I believe there's a massive compromise here that if we really, and George Bush was fighting for this until 9/11 happened, then once 9/11 happened, you can't, immigration reform was off the table. But with that said,
who cares, right?
Right. With that said, if we were to make it easier for people, both skilled and unskilled, to come into the country, when I say unskilled, I mean farmers, people like those hands-on jobs.
Our farming viewers out there, he doesn't mean it.
I don't think you're unskilled, but the government does. But at the same time, make immigration easier, maybe offer a path, an option for naturalization for those who are already here. Because you can't just deport 13 million people. It's just not doable. But also strengthen the borders like no tomorrow. Make the borders strong. Sure, put drones, do what you got to do, but make it actually so there is no incentive to come over.
You don't mean drones with like weaponry, right? I just want to be clear. Like drones striking people crossing the border.
Are you talking about the RC ones or the?
No, the ones that we put over Iran, the ones with the bombs.
Oh boy.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. So no, but honestly, strengthen the border, but only do that if we actually have an easy, viable, I don't know, maybe 6 month to 2 year process for people to come over here as a legal immigrant, right? Streamline it, make it doable. Like, hey, if you want to come over here and work on a farm, you can do that. You don't need to be a computer scientist to come to our country. Maybe put quotas on it. I don't know.
So let me summarize what you're saying, because really the question was, is it a problem that it's difficult to come here, and a lot of that was kind of explaining how difficult it is to come here, which is probably good for most of the viewers.
Sure.
But it sounds like your main contention was saying that, yes, it's difficult to come here and we should make it easier, is that if we make it easier, our immigration problems will be reduced, right? The people that are coming here illegally and things. So it's really like, let's soften our immigration, our legal immigration system, allow more people in that way, so that we have less people trying to get in illegally.
And then strengthen our border to deter undocumented immigration. But if you soften, I really like that word, if you soften legal immigration, I think a lot of the people who are crossing the border wouldn't ever even try to cross the border in the first place if there was a genuine legal route.
Unless they're cartels.
Well, sure, and that's why you'd strengthen the border.
That's why he said drones with bombs.
Yeah, that's why he said drones. So Chris, we've talked about this before, and I've generally agreed with the premise, right? So strengthen the borders 100%, and then naturalize everybody. I don't have much of a problem with that. It's like it's just me and every single other Republican is just like a little salty. It's like, well, they broke the damn law. Like, and another tangent before I get to my actual point. I was actually surprised when I found out that people aren't just automatically deported when you find out that they're illegal. Like, I was like, wait, what do you mean? What do you mean they get to stay if they haven't committed a crime? Like, they committed a crime crossing the border. So, but that was like, young me, so naive, whatever. Not really my big point. But I just thought of this just now as you were talking about this scenario, so to speak, right? If we make immigration more robust, right? So let's say we have 70 immigration judges. We bump that bitch up to 700, right? And we start getting people coming in, right? Like, come on, let's go. I just realized that the reason why it's 10 years long is because people are willing to wait that long, and that's not going to change when
maybe they're not, though. What about all the? I would beg there's 13 million undocumented immigrants in our country that beg to differ.
Yeah, but they're not waiting for anything. They just came in.
Because, they just made it over because they said, all right, well, do I wait? I'm 30 now. Do I wait till I'm 40 to go to the country? Do I risk it all and say, all right, cool, I may not get Social Security or Medicaid, but at least I can have a job.
Right. In the greatest country in the world. I got it. But I'm not really talking about the overflow, the people who are the people who go because they don't want to wait the 10. My argument is that 10-year waiting period won't change. There will just be 10 times as many people in the queue waiting for now 10 years. Because you're not actually changing, like, you're not, because this country is so desirable, right, that all of those people come in despite the fact that they could get deported anytime they get pulled over. Like everybody is trying to come to this country. And it's like one of those things where it's like, I used to think about this for women's fashion, right? So if you made, like, for example, back in the 17 or 1800s, if you made corsets less tight, women would immediately tighten them back up, because it's not about the pain, it's about like how much effort you put into the fashion, right? So if you somehow made fashion easier, they would make it harder again, just because it's about the actual effort. So in this way, it's not about how many people are trying to come in. It's about how many people are willing to wait, how long they're waiting, right? And right now that's 10 years, and that's not going to change even if you start increasing the volume.
That will change. And I think your logic on the math there doesn't make sense. And I'll kind of say why, right? Like, if there were more people willing to wait 10 years than there are now, then the wait would be 11 years, right?
No. Yeah,
it's like people are looking at it right now and they're like, oh, I'm not going to apply because the wait's so long.
Correct.
Right? So those people aren't willing to wait 10 years. So if the queue built back up to 10 years again, it's not like those people still wouldn't be willing to wait 10 years, even though the process was faster. Right.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is more people, like the number of people that are waiting right now, that number would increase. More people would probably apply, but it wouldn't just automatically fill back up to 10 years. Right. There would be
8 or 9 years. Right.
Or way less, right? Like the number of people, like if let's say there's 100 people that are willing to wait 10 years, and that's how many people are there now.
I disagree with your math.
Yeah, well, disagree with my math. That makes sense.
Yeah.
You can have a cognitive bias all you want there, buddy.
Maybe this
but
is
the point is
the birth of a think tank right here. We got to start a think tank on this.
Yeah. The point is though,
numbers and me correcting him.
Yeah. The point is though that the number of people would dramatically increase that are coming in. And I agree with you that more people that currently aren't on the list would start applying.
You just disagree with the scale.
Yeah, and we would, and if the goal, and also if our goal from a country's perspective is to process these fast, right? Then okay, we said, hey, let's increase the number of judges to 700, and then we see like, oh, 700 wasn't enough. Now we need 1,000. Right? We would continue to increase our processing as well. Like we would probably be implementing a goal to say, hey, we need to keep this no longer than 2 years.
Right. But my guess is that, I mean, there's 7 billion people in the world, and this
they
country
all want to be here in this
country is a much better place than most of them. I'm not saying they all want to come here.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but what I am saying is that if that time, this is one of those things where it's like it's a feedback loop. So when it drops down to 3 years, suddenly there's like a billion more people who are like, okay, all right, it's time to go to America because it's only a 3-year wait, and then it pops back up again.
If we soften our immigration laws, everyone from Canada is moving in, and nobody's going to be back to hold the glaciers back.
They hate our politics, though.
I know they wouldn't. Yeah, they really wouldn't come down here. They wouldn't.
Canada,
I'm making a joke.
Canadians love their country. They love.
Yeah, I love Canada. I don't know if you guys have been there, but like it's the people are awesome. The culture, everything is just super laid back.
Tim Hortons everywhere. It's great.
They say sorry when it's your fault. You know, it's fucking great.
Good people.
I think I never thought of it in that way, Nate, but I still am here for softening immigration. Maybe the answer is putting a quote on it, but I still think that if you soften immigration and you strengthen the border, I think that at least solves the problems of today. Sure, it's going to have repercussions.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's like it works for me and it works for you. Look, because even if I'm right and the queue just fills back up to 10 years, I mean, we're getting more immigrants, and that's not a problem. Like, I'm not one of those Republicans. Yeah. Just kidding. There's like very few of those Republicans.
So that was going to be my question, my point, which I don't have I've not done research on this, so I can't really speak to it myself. But why is it not a problem to introduce, a large number of people into this country? I'm not talking about it from a cultural perspective or from the quality of the people or anything like that. It's nothing. It's purely like, our infrastructure currently is designed to support, a specific number of people with a specific growth rate. And that includes planned immigration, right? So when our civil engineers and our electrical grid and all of our housing expansions and all of that stuff, that's all planned around expected growth. And if you were to change immigration policy and, blow those numbers up by tens of millions of people, if that was what the case would be, I think there would be a detrimental impact.
No, I can actually counter this regularly because it's a really good point, and it's something that I think that most people that are in this world of immigration needs to be conscious of. That's why you still put quotas in, right? Like you still have caps. Like you're not going to allow in more than X amount of people per year. The reality is right now we're not hitting those caps, and there's a backlog, right?
Because I think it's the amount of judges.
Yeah, and so
okay, so that I wasn't aware of.
Well, part of it too. No, and it's totally fair. Another thing is the current birth ratio. So much like Japan, our generation, or I guess my generation, we are. Yeah, Nate, you and I, our generation. Tim, you're a Zoomer.
No, he's X.
I know I'm making fun of you. I called you a Zoomer, like a young person, but
Ah,
I know. But our generation is not having kids very much like Japan, where we're
Mhm.
being hyper career focused to the detriment. Right. So the reality is that the typical American right now, that is the typical white American, is not having kids, and most Americans right now are white, Caucasian, European descent. We're not having kids in Nate and I's generation, at least not at 18, 19, 20, up to 25. Like, we're waiting into our 30s, and that's going to cause an inverted pyramid of birth to retirement ratio at one point. Immigration helps cap that because, one, immigrant families, culturally, especially when we're talking about those from South America, they have multi-generational households, and that's still common practice, and it's very normal to have more kids. It's not a bad thing, right? It means there's more laborers. It means there's more people that are, and basically that's going to fill up the fact that we don't have, we're not birthing kids, and that matters, right? We don't want to be Japan. Japan's actually in this weird dynamic where it's like they should allow immigrants in, and they kind of are, but
but they're
Japan,
racist as fuck.
they are. They really are. They're like, no, we want to keep this, like, they're like Slytherin of the world. We can't have mudbloods, and so yeah, they do allow a lot of student visas in right now. They do allow a lot of work visas, but not permanent visas. And so if you go look it up, it's some crazy stuff. Like, you got fifth grade classrooms with one kid in it, one whole kid for the entire fifth
Holy
grade right now.
shit.
And so what do you do with
Yeah,
the
they're all working. They're all like committing suicide at work. It's crazy.
Yeah. And so we don't want that. So immigration, as well as existing immigrant families, help cap that, because immigrant families are more likely to have kids at the typical, trajectory of a timeline of having kids to meet our inverted pyramid, to combat an inverted pyramid. Whereas, like, Nate, I mean, I don't know about you, but like, I don't plan on having kids until like late 30s, and when I do,
Yeah. If I'm having kids, it's not going to be for a while.
and it's going to be one for me. Like
Right,
we're
and it certainly is not going to be many, right? We're not having. I mean, I love my aunt and uncle. They had 5 kids. You don't see that anymore, right?
I have 3. My biological family, I have, let's see, I have at least 3 siblings, but probably more that I just have never met. My adopted family, there's 4 kids, and so my parents all had like 4 or 5 siblings.
Right.
I think my dad had
My grandparents are like 7 siblings. Like,
yeah, for me, like maybe 1 kid, and if we do, and I'm at a place in life right now where I can realistically say, like, yeah, I know what I want. We're adopted.
right.
And maybe 2 at max, like maybe 2, but probably only 1 realistically. And so,
Right.
And that's the case for most millennials. It's definitely going to be the case for most of the Gen Z, and I imagine that's going to continue onward with, unless you have some like weird like cult, like whoever comes after Gen Z is like, no, we're going to be like those of the 1940s and like have a bunch of kids, which is probably not going to happen.
Right. So let me talk about. I mean, so it seems like we have a little bit of time with this. Let me devil's advocate, and some of this I believe to a degree. So whatever it is, I'm already the bigot anyway. So, but let me make the case for, or we'll just open up the discussion to talk about this aspect of immigration. So we've touched on this before, and it is a very delicate topic these days. So I'll try to be as clear as I can, and everybody can disavow, and then we can move on. But there is something to do with the volume of immigration mixed with how you assimilate the population, right? So number one, you have to start out with the Republicans. The Republicans, okay, a lot of people, not just Republicans, people in the country value the United States for what it is, right? So we have a culture, a United States culture, right? We have a culture of rights. We respect the Constitution. We're a liberal Western democracy, right? There's a whole bunch of different ways that you can say it, but there is a way to be quote unquote American, right? And I'm being a little bit reductive, but we have to have the conversation, so we have to move forward with it. So the question becomes, and there seems to be a definitely a value gap between the left and the right here. The question becomes is, how much do you expect and how do you plan for the migrant populations to assimilate into American culture, right? And with that is language, culture, whatever it is, right? Americanism, whatever it is.
I actually have an answer brace for this because I was like, I bet Nathan's going to bring this up.
That racist fuck. He's gonna say
like,
it.
We have our in-house bigot, so let me.
Yeah,
make
that's
sure I
right.
plan- So
TM.
honestly, I mean, think of it this way, right? Would you not agree that it is more likely for assimilation to occur if you come to our country legally, not via asylum, but legally through a citizenship matriculation process where you have to learn the concept? Don't you think assimilation would occur easier that way?
Well, specifically since doing that requires you to pass a test that makes it so you
I mean, a test schmest. Anybody can pass.
No, but it's
but you have it's based on American history and
I'm not saying it's useless,
understanding of the English language and other things that whatever the test should be built around. I don't know how good of a test it is, but it should be built around what we define as the core of our culture that should be taken upon anyone that's a citizen.
Either way, I'm sure the people that assimilate and take the tests and the classes are a lot more, or immigrate here legally, are a lot more assimilated than those who are coming over here undocumented, or at least in theory are more quote unquote what Republicans would like to see American. I don't care, but I know Republicans care. And so to me, that actually just builds the argument. It's like, hey, let's soften up on legal immigration, because the more people that can come here legally, take citizenship tests, take these courses.
So we already agree with that, though, right? So I'm already for blowing out. Let's multiply the amount of judges by 10. Yeah. But the question becomes, do you expect them to assimilate to the culture? Is American culture valuable enough to try to enforce on other people, right? And let me just let me put an example in front of you, Chris. Right? So I'm not going to name a culture. I'm going to make a culture up, right? So we'll just say that there's a culture that doesn't value female autonomy, right? And we start.
I wonder what culture this can be.
There are plenty of them.
Canadians.
You're thinking of one that I've already reviewed, but there are plenty of them out there.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we start taking in millions of these people and they don't assimilate, would that be a problem for you? Right, yeah, because then the value structure of the United States might start changing. And then the follow-on question is then how do you address that, right, without being bigoted?
It depends, right? So I think we our country, and this is may actually conflict with what people know already, especially on the right. Like, for instance, our country, while imperfect, is meant to be this multicultural, multiracial, multi-ethnic country. We do not have a established national language, national religion, for very clear, specific reasons. And that is because, for us, government, the way we organize our country, that is what American is, right? Like, Americanism to me is the virtue of our Constitution, of our amendments, of our laws, of our those inalienable rights that we hold dear.
Agreed.
To me, the other beautiful dynamic of our country, while imperfect as of now, is this belief that as long as you're operating within the framework of what is legal and the framework of what is in the Constitution, then things are kind of fair game. If you want to have a progressive, polyamorous relationship with 8 people in California and Los Angeles, you can do that. If you want to start a Mormon cult with Mitt Romney,
Utah,
you can do that. Now, if you are mutilating people, you can't do that. And so that is where a line obviously.
So you're pushing your beliefs onto other people about who they can mutilate.
Yeah, you can't just push mutilation beliefs. Come on.
But what if? So then what if the culture is sort of consensually oppressive? And I've actually struggled with this. There is not a good answer for this. But what if? What if? So I'll just say it. So this is not. Oh God, the cat. Okay, so. For example, and this is not the only example, and for the viewers, I swear to God, I don't have an axe to grind with Islam. But for example, actually, we can just do nuns, right? Because this is actually a really good thought exercise, right? So if you're required to wear a head garb because men say so, right? Nuns, for example, which is oppressive, but the women accede to that oppression because it's part of the culture. is that something that you would prefer spread through the United States? Which is, it's a fundamentally an illiberal idea, right? The idea behind it is that you have to be hiding your hair because it's seductive to men.
Well, no, it's not. It's not. That's jading it a little bit. I think a lot of it. First and foremost, our country's not in the vacuum. So nuns have been around for the ages. Catholic churches have been around for the ages, and it's never the idea of going into a nunnery has not sparked a giant trend. As there's no viral nun, right? We're not out here doing that. So.
And the dynamic, and so force this on people who are not part of their sect.
Well, yeah.
So I think the answer to this is not that hard, actually, and that is, let's say a group of people immigrate here, where from Germalanga and they're required to wear headgarbs, right? I just tried to make up a country.
That was pretty good,
right?
That was cluster.
Yeah. So they're required to wear these headbands, right, or headgarbs, and so they come here and they're not required to wear them here. It's not a law. It's not a societal thing, and they choose to wear them. Great, continue wearing them, right?
Yep.
And a few of those women decide, I don't want to wear it, and then their husband beats them for it, and he gets arrested, right? Because that broke our rules and our laws. So it's really not that difficult. Like, if they want to continue wearing them, great. If they don't, then they don't. And if the result of that is that something happens from their spouse that is illegal, then that gets taken care of, right?
And additionally, I do just want to say, I totally agree with what you said, Tim. To build upon that, the idea of the hijab, or a headscarf, or nuns having this hyper conservative clothing is not because men are pigs and can't control themselves. In a way, it kind of is, but it's deeper than that. It's not an impressive thing. It's more of like the way I've heard it explained is like, first and foremost, a nun is to them, they are giving up their worldly desires and saying, okay, I'm pursuing, and so therefore that includes, like, I am not going to allow myself to be taken part in the dynamic of love with another human. The other dynamic is that a lot of the times is in Islam, and I apologize because I might butcher this a little bit in terms.
That's okay. We butcher everything, honestly. So
because I don't want to speak for someone who's Muslim and I'm not. But the idea of it is, as well, is that women should be seen for. Here's the reality: a lot of men maybe not you guys, definitely not you guys. But the reality is, a lot of men in this world, are hyper misogynistic. Whether or not you guys aren't going to see it.
I love getting massages.
Well, hey, I'm sure. I know. Yeah. I'm sure when you go into work, it's in your ass, right? But women, these are things that are happening a lot to them. We don't see it because we don't navigate the world as a woman. And so for those who are Muslim, the idea of it is that, see for me for my intellect, see me for who I am, regardless of femininity. And then additionally, for their husband, who has seen them for the intellectual, the true human they are, then sure, then you can experience that level of intimacy and femininity and love and all the things that we value in that, right? Because you can't go through this world without love. It's so important.
I think that that's a an interesting point, and for those that believe that and follow that, and it's a different way of respecting them, I think that's great. But in a lot of the countries, where this type of thing takes place, that I don't think that's the culture, right? The culture is, women can't vote. They're just now being allowed to drive, right? Like they have a lot of other rules that contradict what you're saying. And so I think there's plenty of countries that are that way, but I think Nate's contention isn't with those type of beliefs. It's not with the types of beliefs that generally align with the American core value system. And I think that's where the difficulty comes in, like defining what is the American core set of values. What 10 things that do we need to carve in stone? Going back to you get it? Sure. Yeah, because that's
I think just Nate, before you go, I think we basically trip into that territory again of like, hey, here's our ideals. We may not live up to them, but these are our ideals. Maybe that's the case for Islam, just as here in the United States. Like, we have these ideals. All men are created equal. But then you end up with that line existed in the Constitution when they had slavery. and women couldn't vote, right? So we have these ideals, whether or not we live up to them in the moment, is another conversation, and that's why it's national discourse, as you've said before. So, but these are our ideals, and I think we should strive for them,
Right.
even if we can't reach it, even if we never reach it, we still have to strive towards them.
I agree.
The true
I
challenge.
agree. So,
Before we move on to the next point, I wanted to
yeah,
touch
I'm not ready to move on
something,
anyways.
something that we talked about a second ago.
Sure.
Is we were talking about the number of immigrants that come in, and we were talking that there are a set number there. There's a quota that we can allow, and then after that, you got to wait till the next year. But we're not even meeting that quota. So while we were talking, I pulled up some numbers because I really wanted to get an idea for that. And as you said, it's like maybe we need 700 judges instead of 70, right? So the limit for immigrants that I could find was 675,000. Shit, I scrolled down in that article. 675,000 visas, permanent visas allowed a year. And then there is no limit on the annual number of visas for citizens, spouses, parents, and things like that, right? So for all of the other methods of coming in, it's 675,000. In 2019, there were 1 million-ish immigrants who received visas for permanent residency. About 50% of those were spouses and family members, and about 50% of those were the other types. So from those two sets of numbers, it looks like we're letting in about 500,000 permanent resident immigrants from out of the 675,000 cap. So we're not far off, and that could be that they're deciding not to let that many in because that particular year they had a lot more spousal visas. I don't know how that all works, but it seems to me that going from 70 to like 75 judges, if it was purely the limitation of the number of judges, would actually be enough to get us to the point of getting to our cap. So I think that changes the discussion point a little bit, because now it's no longer there's a 10-year waiting period because we're so far behind and we just can't process these applications.
And we actually hit the cap.
Yeah, it's a 10-year waiting period because there's so many people that want to come here in comparison to what our cap is. Now, we may not be hitting our cap. There's room to improve there. But based on these numbers, that doesn't seem to be, to me, the largest gap where we're missing, right? Yeah. So,
yep, fair enough.
So do we need to look at increasing that number? Is 1 million or 675,000 not enough?
Well, I'd be interested to find out when that limit was set in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's
It was set in the 1800s. It's like 1 million people was 1/100th of the country, or something like that.
Well, yeah, but even then, that's 1% of the country that's brand new every year. That's pretty huge.
I think that happened.
And like right now with our population, and that was in 2019, those numbers, that was 1 million. And actually, I think those numbers have been going down since then. I think with Trump's immigration policy, but even still, 1 million in, our population's 360 million. So you're still looking at 1/3% of the population.
Yeah, a little
came
less.
in
0.001 if you let in 500,000.
No, 1 million came in.
Oh, got you. So it'll be 0.00.
It's almost 1/3%.
Which I feel like isn't. I mean, I'm not a census professional here, but
it doesn't seem like very much.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a lot, especially when you factor in birth rates and all that good stuff.
I mean, year over year, it might add up, but it's mostly undocumented. How many was it? Like 15 million or something like that?
What? But that's how many of? That's a very. It's not like 15 million a year. That's 15 million total.
No. I know. I'm just talking like totals. Like if you were to like say that, like the racist was to say that the population is changing or whatever that means. Like.
Well, and I'm not worried about it changing. But like if you go back to where if we're letting in 1/3% a year from foreign countries is permanent. These are also permanent visas. There's
Yep.
a lot more temporary. So you have a percent. If you go, if you take that out for 30 years, that's 10% of the population, right? That was immigration. If the population didn't grow, so going back to what Chris's statement was, which is our birth rate's kind of flatlining, which it is,
or they didn't die. It's a little bit more complicated.
Yeah. But I mean, so I'm not saying
leave.
it's too much. I'm not saying it's too much. I'm not saying it's too little. I'm just kind of throwing numbers out there to try and, get a
It all
sense
depends
of,
on what your goal is.
But
All
if
right.
you double that,
So,
if you double that, that's,
in the
could be
future,
big.
I would love for us to do another immigrant podcast, but bring on some not just immigrant like in the know as a professionals, but someone who's like, I don't know, working on the census or working on I don't know, let's bring an ICE agent in here, but not one of the.
No, that's what I was going to suggest, just to be inflammatory. But yeah, I actually know someone. I might have a connection there, so we'll just.
Well, I don't want a border agent, but I would love to have someone that actually.
No. I have somebody who I have somebody whose parent works in ICE in the offices, right? So a high level view, but not an actual agent.
Interesting. I'd love to hear as well someone who works on at a high level of approving visas to say or the person that's deciding, one of the people in the think tank that's deciding, this is the number that we want to have allowed in this year. I would love to hear what actually goes into that number beyond just an article on Yahoo or something.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. All right, so with that, we're gonna move on. We're trying something new tonight. We're gonna do a new segment, right? And we came up with a catchy, snazzy name. It's called Bullshit Philosophy with Nathan. Right?
I'm here, guys. I'm just getting water.
That's okay. So
while he's doing that, so we don't
go
whatever.
ahead.
Denny, there's something called Google. Use it. It's about
you can't call out our audience. We only have a small audience.
It's about 70,000 a year. At least back in 2015, 2016, which was the first Google thing that came up. He asked, what is the estimate of illegals that come into the country every year?
70,000. That's definitely down, isn't it? It used to be a million.
A year? No. It was in the hundreds of thousands.
I'm sorry. Yeah, 100,000.
Yeah. So it's down to that, but that was in 2016. It was down to 70,000 a year. I didn't do a ton.
There's not actually a lot of. I was looking all over the place today for recent immigration statistics, and for 2019 and 2018, it doesn't seem to exist. It was 2017 was the last year I was seeing stuff. But all right. With that being said, so in this new segment, Bullshit Philosophy with Nathan, I'm pretty much just gonna pose the question, right? And we're just gonna engage in sophistry and conjecture and speculation out the ass, and it should be a lot of fun. So, all right. So the idea that I prepared for you guys tonight, and I'm going to present it for a little bit here, and then we can talk about it. So, I have this idea, and it's a little bit difficult to articulate, and I'm pretty far down on my apple juice, so we'll see if I can get this right. But I have this idea, and I've heard people like Jordan Peterson and other people like Gad Saad, Gad Saad's a biological and evolutionary biologist. I've heard people like that talk about this idea. And the idea is that human beings are not designed to function with as much information as we have available, right? So we're not designed to emotionally correctly respond to statistics that span countrywide, right? And so let me give you a few examples to start primering your brain.
Don't steal my example.
I wonder if I will. I might.
We talked about it the other day, so you better not. You know what my example is.
Hopefully, I'm not taking it from you. So let's talk about this, statistics that we have a hard time. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about statistics that we have. We just can't conceptually wrap our mind around, right? So the difference between a million, a billion, and a trillion, right? So we toss these numbers around all the time. We're just doing a $1.9 trillion package. What does that mean? What is 1.9 trillion, and how does the human brain conceptualize that amount right there, right? We know it's bigger than a billion, which is bigger than a million, which is bigger than 1,000, which is bigger than 100, which is all I have in my bank account, right? So let's talk. So okay, so for an example, this is the first example I'll bring up, right? Okay, so man, this is such a small portion of the page; it's not really worth showing. But 1,000,000 seconds is 12 days, for example, right? 1 billion seconds is 31 years, and 1 trillion seconds is 31,688 years. Right. So for example, that doesn't even seem linear to our brain, right? And it technically isn't really, but like we just like for me
It is.
comes this stop it, Timothy, right? You tell me it's linear, but that doesn't feel linear to the brain, right? We have a hard time conceptualizing this. This is another thing too. We have a hard time conceptualizing wealth, right? So if we talk about who's wealth, all right. So the 30 richest Americans in this particular meme. Let me just read this out here. So the concentration of wealth is staggering, right? I don't actually care about the premise of this meme, but it's going to talk about something that just kind of blows your mind because it's really hard to think about. Let's say you earn $2,000 an hour and work full time from the birth of Jesus Christ to today, which was roughly 2,000 years ago. And let's say you never paid taxes and saved every penny. You would have around $8.3 billion today, and you'd still be there'd still be 30 Americans richer than you, right? So literally making $2,000 an hour every hour from between the time Christ was born until now. I'm sorry, not every hour, every workday hour between the time the birth of Christ and now. You would still just have $8.3 billion. So like, just imagining what it's like to have $80 billion or whatever it is that Bezos has. So another thing that we can't wrap our heads around. So like odds, right? So just like I pulled up this fun article about 20 things more likely to happen than winning the lottery. And yeah, getting struck by lightning, way more likely to happen than winning the lottery. There's a whole bunch of stuff in this article. I'm not going to go through all of it, but like becoming the next Warren Buffett, like by actually working yourself up, more likely, dying in a plane crash, whatever, right? So we have all of these, and I'll get to this in a second, but we have all of these.
Wait, so you're saying I'm not going to win the lottery?
Yeah, it's very unlikely. It's if you think you're going to win the lottery, you shouldn't get on a plane because it's more likely to die in a plane crash than win the lottery.
I don't play the lottery. I don't play the lottery.
There you go. That's smart. Right. So, or I think it's smart. Whatever, you do you. So okay. So let me apply this to a political context, and then I'll sort of let you guys roam, and we can talk about this. Right. So one particular way that you could apply this, and this applies in a whole bunch of different ways. Like I could argue that Black Lives Matter activists, they overvalue they over emotionally respond to the amount of black people that die, right? And they don't actually know how many black people die, but they emotionally respond to the fact that black people are dying, and they say black people are being over prosecuted, right? And it's a lot of it is an emotional response. Some of it is, I'm not saying all liberals are just emotional bags of emotion, but there's statistics there, but we're not capable of just emotively responding in the correct way. That's my hypothesis. I'm on the right. I'm not even going to bother defending that tonight. But let's talk about. Have you guys heard about the uptick in anti-Asian attacks recently?
I have. It's pretty bad in New York.
Yeah, Tim, did you say yes?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Okay, so I mean, it's been splashed all over my newsfeed, right? Uptick in anti-Asian attacks, uptick in Asian attacks, right? Old Asian man pushed over,
and no one's talking about it. Like no one, like it's not getting any attention.
So I mean, you say that, but like it was splashed all over my feed.
But
like,
wait, so did I? Yeah, I was gonna say is like he literally just said this has been all over my feed, and you're like, no one's talking about it. So well, one of the two is true.
I'm not to steal the thunder, but a lot of people on the left haven't been talking about this.
On the left haven't?
I have not
Well,
seen
I mean,
it.
everybody in the news is left anyway, so they're talking about it. But no, okay, so I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no.
Let me make my point, and then let's run with this, right? So my point is that I did some calculations, right? I found, so I tried to compare this to other. What's the term? What is it? Hate crimes, right? There it is. Yeah. So I tried to compare this to other hate crimes, and I did some basic math. So the chance, so right now, if you take the total Asian population in the United States and you divide it by the amount of crimes, or whatever the way it is to get the correct percentage, it turns out that as an Asian, you are 0.01%. You have a 0.01% chance of being the victim of a hate crime, right? And that's 1 out of 10,000 for those who can't do mental math like me. It turns out that is exactly that. What's that?
Said thanks. I needed that.
Yeah. Well, I did too. I did it on Google, right? I did the work before we got here. Turns out that the chances of being a hate crime as a Jew, it's the exact same, right? It's actually a little bit higher as a Jew, and then it's about half that as an Islamic person in the United States, right? So my point is that, and then I'll let you guys go, is that we're not emotively responding correctly to this, right? So we are responding to an uptick, which is a slight difference, but Jews are already experiencing and have been experiencing for years this relative amount of hate crimes, right? And yet this is not what's splashed all over my front page. What's splashed all over my front page is Asians, right? Even though they're getting persecuted at about the exact same rate or slightly less than Jews, and relatively around the rate that Muslims are.
So before we dig into that particular topic, I want to make a point. You, I think, have lumped in two separate philosophical issues.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
One of those is that I agree with you that the human psyche struggles to properly realize the impact of large quantities, like large numbers of things on like country size scales or whatever. So as an example, like if somebody told you 500,000 people died from COVID, you're like, damn, that sucks. Like, that's crazy.
Right.
And then if somebody says, hey, my grandma died from COVID, you feel that much deeper, right? And so our psyche is, for whatever reason, designed that, and it works in movies too, right? You see a plane crash in a movie, no big deal. You see the main character's mom or something die, and you're like tearing up, right? So
right, exactly.
So that's one issue. The other issue is our ability to comprehend large numbers.
Right.
Which is not an emotional thing. It's just a completely different psychological issue. And so I think those work separately, and they can work combined in some particular areas.
Right, like the emotional response to spending $1 trillion, I suppose. Right. So like if you don't know what $1 trillion is, you can't really properly emote to it. But you're right. There's probably two separate issues there. Yeah, but
those are two separate things, I guess. I just wanted to make sure that we were talking about the right things.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, when you look at, I agree with what Tim said. I mean, the reality is, I think there is a truth in the philosophy that like we just can't conceptualize large numbers or large quantities. But another thing, the reality is like this dynamic. The reason why it's on the news, I would actually very much so challenge hesitation for the reality of whether or not we're reacting to a certain crisis correctly when it comes to like hate crimes. Is because, and this is going to sound really cynical, but the reality is like, hate crimes against the Jewish population or hate crimes against African American and Black Americans, maybe they're just kind of like steadied out, right? Maybe they're tapered out. Like it's like, yeah, they're happening, they're going to happen, and we'll react to them effectively. For Asian Americans and people who resemble Asian Americans, the reality is because of COVID, there's been a massive uptick because people are now like the Wuhan virus or the Chinese flu, and these are things that are inciting, or awakening hateful sentiments towards Asian Americans.
Yep.
And so that's why it's the news. It's because it wasn't happening, and now it is happening. At least more than it was in the past, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, that's you can even understand that, right? If we were thinking about this as like humans are designed to, right? And in this case, it's look at things that might affect them or harm them or affect them in the future. It makes sense to be more sensitive to a trend, I suppose.
Well, it's also the news because it's not always happening, right? Like Tiger Woods getting into a car accident is the news, not because car accidents happen every single day. That's not the news, right? Car accidents happen all the time about making the news. But it's because Tiger Woods is famous. It's a weird thing to happen for a famous person to get into like a car accident like that. It doesn't happen as often. But, maybe, again, not to sound awful, but it's like, all right, if Jewish hate crimes are happening, every single day somewhere in the country, and then all of a sudden there's an uptick in Asian American hate crimes, of course we're going to have coverage on Asian American hate crimes versus Jewish. If we saw a Jewish uptick, you better believe that'd be back in the news.
Yeah. Well, that's actually not true. So I don't have the sources for this because I didn't realize we were going to talk specifically about this. But there was actually a story. I don't know if it was in the New York Times or somebody who was interviewing somebody from the New York Times, where they said, "Hey, there's been an uptick in anti-Semitic violence. Why aren't you guys writing about this? Like, why are you writing about BLM?" And the answer was actually because he actually literally said, "It's not because that doesn't fit the narrative." right? Which is an
I don't-
interesting thing. And we talk a little bit more about media manipulation there, but like
I gotta verify. Let's
I'm not gonna. Again, I say take it on faith a lot, but you don't have to for this one. But that is part of what came into this idea. But let me focus it up a little bit, I guess. So,
What's
I
also what sells, right? I mean,
right, because that's what I'm saying. Like now we're talking about a little bit more about media manipulation, whether it's manipulation or it's just like it's the articles that win because we want to see those things.
There's at least 5 articles from the New York Times just in the past 12 months, all talking about Jews being targeted for anti-Semitism. So whoever,
this was like from last year, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, this is. I'm also looking back. There's 2018, 2019 articles. This is maybe I don't know. Maybe so you had some dumbass like freelance writer who has one article published in the New York Times, and on his Twitter bio he's like New York Times writer, and then he's the one that cited this, right? Like you get that a lot in the journalism world. You get some asshole who gets one.
I'm not married. Look, I'm not married to it. Like I don't have my source, so I'll back off that for sure. But I don't know. Look. So I think, and what do you guys think about this? I think the human brain is designed for, right? Talking like evolutionary biology here. I think our brains were designed to handle our immediate environment, which would usually be our tribe, as we're hunter gathering, right? And our immediate environment. So like wherever we are, or if we have a migratory pattern where we move between one place and another, or if we're just migrating, whatever. So I think our brains we're meant to emotionally respond to a death in the tribe. Maybe like honestly, like a death in the tribe, a change in the environment, just that. Like we're not calibrated to respond to like what does 500,000 deaths due to COVID mean, right? And then you can like do all sorts of statistical analysis, but at the end of the day, like how do you emotionally respond to that?
It's the same number of people that were allowed to permanently immigrate into this country.
Hey guys, my cat just pulled my green screen down, so I'm gonna.
My cat has been messing with my green screen all night.
I don't have cats in here. They ain't allowed.
But to answer that, so I'm off the video for a second because my cat just took me out. But for what it's worth, I totally agree with you, Nate. I don't think our minds are. I think our minds are pre-programmed on tribalism and other things. Like, so here's an example of that.
I thought you believed God designed our brains.
Well, I mean, the way we've developed, I think that's a whole other bucket. For what it's worth, right? There's other things our brains are designed for that we haven't evolutionary caught up with, and I'm gonna bear with me for just like 45 seconds as I make this point. For example, our brains, especially in New England, still register for like hibernation era. That's why like in the winter we become more lethargic. That's why we will be more willing to eat more in the winter, or we'll actually subconsciously be more tired in New England because our brains actually hit hibernation mode. Do we need to hibernate in New England? Of course not. You can go to the gym. You can go there's no reason for it. In modern society, we don't hibernate, but evolutionarily we haven't. Again, sugar, fats. We love sugar as Americans, as humans, because evolutionary, sugar is a rare substance in nature. So it's considered valuable by our minds, even though we have a massive abundance of it now. So, however, even though our minds and our bodies haven't evolutionary caught up with certain things, I believe we also, this is some deep philosophy, we occupy and have the opportunity to hold a level of sentience profound enough to combat these dynamics. Like, yes, I can't wrap my head around 500,000 deaths, but I can do my best to try to conceptualize and say, all right, there's some serious gravity to this, and be able to delineate the difference between 500,000 COVID deaths and then the puppy that dies in the TV show, and that breaks my heart, right? Like, both are sad. I might cry over the puppy. I may not cry over seeing the number 500,000, but because of the profound sentience we hold, I can say, all right, this is really significant, and I need to be conscious of this. In the same way that I have to say, you know what, I'm going to drink my coffee black from now on because sugar is as abundant as it ever could be. Not to take something so rudimentary compared to 500,000 deaths, but same dime.
Well, it's the same brain, right? You're using the same brain to think about both of them. But so let me ask you this, right? And I don't know if you'll dispute the statistics, but so for example, in 2019, there were, I believe it was 13 unarmed black men shot by police, right? But the emotive response was much more akin to, say, thousands of black people being shot by the police, right? For that, I see an emotional parity between fact and response, right? And I think that's because of the prevalence of such incidents, right? I think it's because every time it happens, like almost literally every time it happens, it is front page and we see it. So we assume that there's 10 times more of it behind what we don't see.
Well, I think in this particular, I see where you're going here, and I see why the connection exists. I do. And not to bring us back down the rabbit hole of past conversations, but I think, this is more the shooting of a black man by police is, to me, the Hemingway tip of the iceberg to what is existing below and has been. So it's like what comes forward, but there's a lot behind those 13 shootings. There's a lot of racial profiling. There's a lot of ticketing and whatnot. And sure, I know you have combative statistics for all of these things on the other side, but
as we do, right? And that one might even be a combative one, but
to me, that's what that is. It's like, hey, we have an extreme tip of the iceberg, but it's simply reflecting like that is the peak of a giant mountain that we need to talk about.
Right. Yeah. And
use a different example then, right? Like school shootings, right? They don't happen that often, right? They garner massive attention and massive emotional response, right? So if we want to take a different example, I mean, is your argument the same on that one, Chris? That school shootings are just the tip of the iceberg of something that we as a society really feel needs to be deeply addressed, or is there a different reason why they elicit such an emotional response?
I don't know, Nate. What do you think?
I would leap to your defense a little bit. I would say probably not, right? Because there's different circumstances there, right? I mean, Chris does believe, correctly so, in many cases, that there is a history of racism, right? And he's seen racial profiling, and he's specifically, way more than me, he's seen statistics that would promote the idea that racial profiling is alive and well, that racial bias goes into killings, that this stuff it's not just that it happens to those 13 people, it's that it's malicious. There's malicious intent that leads to those 13
Yeah, so just to be clear, I wasn't trying to play down the racial thing. I was trying to find another example that didn't fall under that category so that we could talk about the emotional disconnection rather than finding one that actually has other reasons behind it, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. It's like there's no, so like you can talk about the causes behind school shooting, and to put myself in Chris's shoe here, I mean, he would probably talk about the problems behind school shootings might be kids on drugs, or like Adderall or whatever. Mental health, right? All those kinds of things that are not something that you can point at people, right? That is not a racist or a violent action. That is a poorly run health system, or it is a poorly run whatever system. That is not something to be scared of yourself if it's not happening.
So for what it's worth, I can make this a race thing if I wanted to, because there is, and I get, I realize a lot of people get discomforted by this, and so by no means am I saying that you guys or myself are the next school shooter, but pretty much every single school shooter has been a young disenfranchised white male, and I think there's a conversation to be had there, right? There's a problem there, like what is going on in these young kids' minds? Like, is it hate? Is it racism? Is it disenfranchisement? Is it loneliness? Is it mental health? Is it a society?
Chat says video games.
Oh God, chat, stop it.
They're like Call of Duty 24/7. No, they're not going IRL with Call of Duty, but I don't know. There's a conversation to be had there. Now I don't know if I'm the one to have it, but it's definitely there. It's definitely like, all right, here's an interesting trend. I noticed that a lot of the people I work with, a lot of my students have had car accidents. I'm like, this is very odd. Is there statistical significance to this? I ran a survey. It's like, oh my gosh, almost every single person that has a license and was in foster care has had a car accident since they've turned 18, and none of them are older than 24. that is statistical significance. When you see lots of mass shootings at schools run by white men, it's like, oh, all right, there might be some statistical significance here. Maybe something to look at. What are the other variables? What are the underlying factors? What's causing this, right? Why are there
what was that compared to just average population number of people that have had an accident?
I'm working on that now, so that's not published yet, but I'm going to be doing a control group soon. But it is significantly higher. When 90% of my students right now that have a license.
So by what age?
Between 18 and 24, 90%. I'm at.
That sounds like a statistical anomaly to me.
That's what I'm saying, and that's a survey of 20 people, so it's not like it holds significance too. It's not just like it's a justifiable sample size. I got to run a control survey. I got to see I'm doing this as internal data, so I'm just trying to and maybe I'll write for a grant for driver's ed or something. But it is concerning, so that's not to take away from the heat of this conversation. But yeah, no, I do think the white male thing with school.
I don't know if that's that high.
Shootings is something that's at least.
That's gotta be.
I mean, I'm trying to find it, and I haven't found the right data yet. But this particular one says 43% of first-year drivers and 37% of second-year drivers are involved in car crashes. So I don't know how many of those overlap, get in two accidents. But if they don't overlap very heavily, that's already 70%ish of drivers that have an accident in the first 2 years.
Well, if they overlap, but they don't, then it's 40%, right? It's 40% would have, which means that if you're a foster youth, is 2 to 3 times more likely to get.
No, in their first year of driving, 43% in their first year of driving.
Which would mean then foster youth are twice as likely to get into an accident.
Why? You start driving when you're 15 or 16. You said by the age of 20.
Maybe in Ohio.
So all my students, again, this is a unique thing. All of them that took the study, it seemed that they got their license at 18 or 19. They got their licenses later, and they got into accidents between 18 and 24.
Yeah, so, I mean, this is saying 70% in the first 2 years if they don't overlap too much. I'll keep looking, but I'm wondering, I wonder if there's...
Let me redirect this conversation in the last couple minutes here, because I thought of the perfect scenario that I want to talk about, right? So, and I don't want either of you to agree with this premise. You don't have to, and we only have a couple minutes here, so we'll just make it quick. One of the prime examples of what I mean by we're not designed to take in nationwide or species-wide statistics is like, for example, and you don't have to agree with this, right? If I were to observe a statistic that said that women were statistically more likely to act a certain way. Like, for example, if I were to observe a statistic that said that women, on average, cleaned more or wanted to clean more or okay with cleaning more, right? I can observe that statistic, and that statistic might be true, and there might be a reason for that, right? But I don't think that humans, knowing that actually helps us, right? We don't have a good emotional response to that, because the emotional response might be like, okay, my girlfriend probably wants to clean more. I should just let her clean everything, right? And that you might argue that that's just the wrong response, but that wrong response came after access to species-wide statistics, right? So what do you think of that? Just comment on that real quick. You can just say it's complete bunk, but what do you think of that scenario?
Chris, you want to go first, or
all you?
I guess I don't really.
I think it's a landmine. That's okay.
I don't know. I mean, I just say live and let live. Let people do what they want to do.
All right. Don't put too much thought into it. That's okay. We're just about out of time anyway. So, did you have that? Did you find a statistic there?
I have a couple. I did look around for the car crash, but I'm finding 4 to 5% of 18 and 19-year-olds will get into a car accident. But I'm this looks like hyper relevant to only Pennsylvania, so it doesn't really.
Still, I can't imagine there's too much statistical disparity between that and the rest of the country.
I mean, I was in 3 car accidents before I left high school.
Wow.
No, I wasn't driving. I was driving in 2 of them, and One of them was weather related, and one of them was somebody else's fault, right? But I was riding in a car with another kid from high school, and he got in an accident too. So, but yeah, I mean, I think it's really high, and every data point that I've been able to find, nothing is exactly like, hey, by this age, you know, you have this number of accidents. But I've seen the thing where it says that I saw one that says, you know, on average, you're going to be in 3 to 4 car accidents in your lifetime. And then every other data point you see shows that the vast majority of accidents happen in your younger years. So the involvement rate, this one's particularly in fatal crashes by age group, is much higher up to the age of 24, and then drops off significantly as you get older. So if you're going to be in accidents 4 times in your life, you're likely to be in one in the first, you know, by the time you're in age 24. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like it seems like it could be a normal statistic, actually. It might not be. I mean, I do think getting your license later might be a problem. You're a little more, you're less controlled by your parents. You're free. You may drive more recklessly.
90% is pretty high. That seems,
definitely.
Yeah,
Let us
I don't know
how that research goes, Chris.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, I gotta do a control population. I think that's the case here. I gotta find just like, you know, 20.
I'm sure the data's out there somewhere. You probably could just get a hold of like Safe Auto and be like, hey, what's the right there?
Yeah. Watch me be the reason that like car insurance goes up for foster youth.
Oh God, no! Yeah, can you imagine.
I'd be like, I redact my survey. I'd be like, no, don't use it.
Biggest asshole. I think that's against the law, right? You can't discriminate based on that, or can you?
I'm sure you could.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can for insurance.
For men and
so
women.
to kind of close a thought on what one of your points was there, Nate, which was talking about large numbers, how we really can't rationalize it a lot of times. I think that's why you see so many analogies to, or, you know, things broken down to numbers that you can understand, right? And when I was trying to find an example for this, I came across one something I thought was interesting, which was somebody was asking, is there, you know, more grains of sand on the planet or stars in the sky, right? And there's a lot more grains of sand on the planet than there are stars in the sky, and not just visible stars, but total expected number of stars, right? But that number of total expected stars is, you know, in the trillions and trillions. And then the person said, but there's more molecules in 3 drops of water than there are in a number of stars expected to exist. Right?
Damn.
Like, which like blows your mind, you know, like, so those types of things, like we can't rationalize. So you were talking about 500,000 COVID deaths. What's that mean? Right.
Yeah.
So I looked up
walking through the world.
Yeah, exactly. And so I kind of looked up, I thought a good idea would be, you know, imagine you went to an NFL stadium. What percentage of that stadium would have died? Like how many people, right? So I looked it up. A stadium, a max filled stadium is generally about 60,000 spectators. So for 500,000 deaths compared to the U.S. population, that means, you know, a little over 83 people out of that stadium would have died due to COVID. And then you take that and you spread it across the entire country, like that ratio.
Right. And then it's like, even when, and then this will be my last point. It's like, even when you know that, right, you know that 83 slice out of the stadium, then I argue you don't even know how to properly.
Yeah, that's too big, right? Yeah. And so maybe you say, how many people work at your, like, you don't go to work anymore. This isn't a great one, but let's say you go to work and you say, hey, 360 people work at my company, right? Then I would say 1/2 of those people died.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
just to
math's a little weird there, but
360 million people in the country.
Oh, yeah, I thought you said 360.
It looks like I'm using it's from the United Kingdom. I'm not getting United States stats, but it does look like 1 in 5 new drivers, so 21%, are in a car accident their first year, and that increases to 26% between years of 18 and 24. So basically,
Well, some of them.
26% of drivers 18 to 24 will have had a car accident, whereas like I'm seeing 90%. So I'm seeing 3 times as likely.
All right. Well, we'll keep the updaters. We'll keep the users updated. Sorry. Good God, the apple juice. All right. So that's gonna be it for us tonight.
All right.
Tried a new segment out. I think we're probably gonna keep beating our head against that wall. A
I
couple
liked it. It
times.
was fun.
How we feel about it. Yeah. I'll choose something a little bit more. Yeah, I had like 2 things I was talking about there. Yeah, whatever. So thanks everybody for joining us. I know Denny's out there. Thanks. Shout out to Denny. Love you.
Shout out to Denny.
Yep. And that's it. All right. Thanks everybody for coming on. I had a good time.
Bye.
See you guys.